The Latin cartel Mafia, a name that evokes fear, power, and lawlessness. These criminal organizations, often operating with military precision, have cast a long shadow over Latin America and beyond. Their influence stretches far, reaching into the heart of communities and the corridors of power. This essay delves into the murky world of the Latin cartel Mafia, exploring their origins, their activities, and their enduring impact. We will examine how these groups function, the devastating consequences of their actions, and the challenges in combating their influence. From the cocaine fields of Colombia to the streets of American cities, the tentacles of the Latin cartel Mafia are vast. Understanding their operations is crucial to tackling this complex and evolving threat. This is a journey into a world shaped by violence, corruption, and the pursuit of illicit wealth. It is a world where the lines between right and wrong become blurred, and where the price of defiance can be deadly. The roots of the Latin cartel Mafia are tangled and deep, reaching back to the mid-20th century. The collapse of legitimate economies, coupled with political instability, created a fertile ground for criminal enterprises to flourish. In Colombia, the birthplace of notorious cartels like Medellin and Cali, the cocaine trade exploded in the 1970s and 80s. Ruthless figures like Pablo Escobar and the Rodriguez Orejuela brothers amassed vast fortunes and power, holding entire nations hostage to their illicit trade. Mexico, strategically positioned on the drug trafficking route to the United States, saw its own cartels rise to prominence. The fall of the Guadalajara cartel in the late 1980s led to a fragmentation of power, giving rise to groups like Sinaloa, Tijuana, and Los Zetas. These early cartels set the stage for the complex criminal landscape we see today. Their legacy is one of extreme violence, corruption, and a ruthless pursuit of wealth and power. Drug trafficking, particularly cocaine, remains the lifeblood of the Latin cartel Mafia. The cocaine trade is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and these cartels control vast networks of production, transportation, and distribution. From the coca fields of the Andes to the streets of Los Angeles and New York, they oversee every stage of the process. This involves complex logistics, corrupt officials, and a willingness to use extreme violence to protect their interests. The human cost of this trade is immeasurable. Addiction tears apart families and communities. The cartel's brutal enforcement methods leave a trail of death and fear in their wake. Despite international efforts to combat drug trafficking, the cartels have proven adept at adapting and evolving. They exploit weaknesses in law enforcement and governance, finding new routes and methods to move their product. While drug trafficking remains their primary source of income, the Latin cartel Mafia have diversified their criminal portfolios significantly. They are involved in a wide range of illicit activities, seeking to maximize profits and expand their influence. Extortion is a common tactic, targeting businesses and individuals alike. Kidnapping for ransom is another lucrative source of income, often targeting wealthy individuals or their families. Human trafficking, arms smuggling, and money laundering are also part of their repertoire. This diversification reflects their adaptability and their ambition to infiltrate legitimate economies. They use their ill-gotten gains to corrupt officials, infiltrate businesses, and launder money through legitimate channels. The result is a blurring of the lines between the underworld and the legitimate world. Section 5. The Iron Fist. How cartels control local communities. The Latin cartel. Mafia's influence extends far beyond the drug trade. They operate with impunity in many areas, wielding power through violence, intimidation, and corruption. This grip on local communities has devastating consequences, silencing dissent and eroding the social fabric. Cartels often impose their own rules, acting as judge, jury, and executioner. They extort businesses, threaten journalists, and bribe or intimidate government officials. Those who dare to oppose them face brutal consequences, often losing their lives or the lives of their loved ones. This climate of fear creates a chilling effect on entire communities. People are afraid to speak out, report crimes, or cooperate with authorities. This silence only emboldens the cartels, allowing them to operate with impunity and tighten their grip on power. Section 6. Living in fear. The impact on ordinary lives. The human cost of cartel violence is staggering. Thousands of people, many of them innocent civilians, are caught in the crossfire each year. Their lives are cut short, their families shattered, and their communities left traumatized. For those who live in cartel-controlled territories, fear is a constant companion. They live with the daily threat of violence, uncertain of who to trust or where to turn for help. This constant stress takes a heavy toll on mental health, leading to widespread anxiety, depression, and PTSD. The cartel's influence also undermines social and economic development. Businesses are afraid to invest, schools struggle to function, and healthcare systems are strained. This creates a vicious cycle of poverty, violence, and despair, trapping communities in a web of fear and insecurity. Section 7. A global network, the international reach of the cartels. While their roots may be in Latin America, the Latin cartel mafia's reach extends far beyond the region. They have established sophisticated international networks, collaborating with criminal organizations across the globe to traffic drugs, weapons, and people. Their tentacles reach into the United States, their primary drug market, where they have established distribution networks and corrupt officials. They also collaborate with European criminal gangs, exploiting weaknesses in border controls and financial systems. This global reach makes tackling the cartels a complex and challenging endeavor. It requires international cooperation, intelligence sharing, and coordinated law enforcement efforts to disrupt their networks and bring those responsible to justice. Section 8. Collaborative efforts, combating transnational crime. Combating the transnational threat posed by the Latin cartel mafia requires a multifaceted approach involving international cooperation, intelligence sharing, and robust law enforcement efforts. Governments and law enforcement agencies across the globe are increasingly working together to target cartel finances, disrupt their supply chains, and dismantle their networks. This includes joint operations, extradition treaties, and sharing intelligence to track their movements and anticipate their actions. However, these efforts are often hampered by corruption, weak institutions, and the cartel's ability to adapt and evolve. The challenge lies in staying one step ahead of these criminal organizations, constantly adapting strategies and closing loopholes that they exploit. Section 9. The evolution of power, shifting alliances, and rivalries. The landscape of the Latin cartel mafia is constantly evolving, with shifting alliances, brutal rivalries, and new groups emerging from the ashes of their predecessors. The fight for control of drug trafficking routes, territory, and political influence fuels a constant cycle of violence and instability. The fragmentation of larger cartels, like the Beltran Leyva organization and the Zetas, has led to the emergence of smaller, more localized groups. These groups often engage in hyper-violent tactics and compete fiercely for control, further increasing violence and insecurity in affected regions. This fragmentation makes it more challenging to target and dismantle these groups, as they operate with less centralized leadership and are more fluid in their structure and alliances. Section 10. The future of the cartels, an uncertain trajectory. Predicting the future of the Latin cartel mafia is a complex endeavor. Despite ongoing efforts to combat them, they have proven remarkably resilient, adapting to changing circumstances and exploiting weaknesses in governance and law enforcement. The demand for drugs, particularly in the United States, remains high, ensuring a steady stream of revenue for these criminal organizations. As long as this demand exists, cartels will continue to find ways to supply the market, adapting their routes and methods as needed. Furthermore, their diversification into other criminal activities, such as extortion, human trafficking, and illegal mining, provides them with alternative revenue streams and further entrenches their power within communities. Section 11. Conclusion. The enduring battle against organized crime. The Latin cartel mafia poses a significant threat to security and stability in Latin America and beyond. Their influence permeates all levels of society, undermining institutions, fueling violence, and trapping communities in a cycle of fear and poverty. Combating this complex and evolving threat requires a sustained and multifaceted approach. This includes strengthening law enforcement agencies, tackling corruption, promoting economic development, and addressing the root causes of violence and insecurity. Ultimately, the fight against the Latin cartel mafia is not just about disrupting criminal networks and bringing perpetrators to justice. It is about building a more just and equitable society where the rule of law prevails and all citizens can live in safety and dignity.